All right, I see we have over 20 participants. Thank you everyone for your time. Welcome to this webinar. It's co-hosted by the West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project and the Center for Transportation and the Environment. It's going to be a panel discussion titled, "What does hydrogen mean for West Oakland?" I'm going to briefly go through some housekeeping before I introduce our moderator. Some rules of the room is the webinar is going to have two sets of guided questions followed by audience Q&A. You can submit questions into the Q&A. Participants are welcome, to submit questions at any point. Please ensure your questions are respectful and appropriate, of course. Due to time constraints, it's very unlikely that we'll be able to answer all your questions during the Q&A, but we do want to make sure they do get answered. If your question is not answered during the webinar, please submit them to Julie at CTE and bbeverage@westoakland.org, and we'll make sure to get you a timely response. With that, I'm going to introduce our moderator. Our moderator has been involved in this project for years now. His name is Brian Beveridge. Been a West Oakland resident since 1999, is the co-founder and executive director of the West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project, which is a resident-based community-based organization and environmental justice group dedicated to improving the health and quality of life in West Oakland. It was also the first community organization to publish a clean air action plan, working with the community following legislation of AB 617 to really bring all the stakeholders together to improve air quality in West Oakland. So with that, I'll pass it over to Brian, who will introduce our panelists.
Thank you, Julia. Oh, look at that great picture. Look anything like that, do I? If you're ever wondering who's the moderator, I'm the guy in the kind of weird pink room with the odd lighting. So our first panelist, or first I'm introducing, because they are all equals, is Jamie Levin. So Jamie is the Director of West Coast Operations at the Center for Transportation and the Environment. Jamie initiated and now manages the NorCal Zero project, which involves 16 public organizations and private companies to launch the largest Class 8 fuel cell truck deployment in North America. He is also the lead of the 1,000 Bus Initiative, which will deploy over 1,000 fuel cell buses as a key project of California's $12 billion ARCHES Hydrogen Hub program. Jamie has been at CTE since July of 2013, and previously he worked for public transit agencies in the Bay Area for 26 years and served as the Director of Environmental Technology at AC Transit, where he developed their successful fuel cell bus program. Jamie holds a Master's of City Planning from the University of California at Berkeley. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian.
Next, we have Austin Blake. Austin is a fleet support representative with over 13 years of experience as a diesel mechanic. For the past 1.5 years, Austin has been supporting Kenworth electric vehicles as well as GET's hydrogen vehicles. He'll tell us what that means in a moment. And Austin has completed both general and advanced Hyundai hydrogen training. Austin is looking forward to the future of hydrogen technology. I think everyone on the panel might be doing that as well. Austin, can you just tell us what GET stands for?
Global Expedited Freight. This is the customer running these hydrogen trucks.
Great, thank you. Bill Abudi, an old friend of the community. As founder and CEO of Oakland Maritime Support Services and the Oakland Gateway Project, Bill leads his company vision with the Oakland community, the local trucking industry, and the Bay Area environmental ecosystem in mind. He has been serving the local trucking industry in Oakland since 1992, after going to work for his brother's AA trucking company in 1998, leaving behind his own vending machine business and a career track in the hotel industry. So you can tell Bill's quite an entrepreneur. This eventually grew into the Oakland Maritime Support Services, the 15-acre property that is now being developed into the Oakland Gateway, providing indispensable truck services and a community hub for all modes of local transit. Bill contributes his time to many community-based organizations, was appointed by Mayor Ron Dellums to the Workforce Investment Board, and serves on the Oakland Commerce Association's Board of Directors. Welcome, Bill. Next, we have Sam Wilson. Sam is a senior analyst at the Union of Concerned Scientists, focusing primarily on regulations, laws, and policies that accelerate the transition to zero-emission freight. His research provides state and federal policymakers, NGO coalitions, and communities with fact-based analysis and decision-making tools to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and toxic air pollution from the freight system. Sam joined the Union of Concerned Scientists after working in climate and air quality policy development with several agencies in Washington State. Sam completed his master's in environmental studies from Evergreen College and has a bachelor's degree from Birmingham Southern College in the urban environmental studies with a focus in public policy. And finally, the man who sits in the seat, Reggie Bean, has been a California truck driver for over 28 years. Reggie has driven, seems like the old song says, any kind of rig that's ever been run, everything from reefers, refrigerated trucks, and the food industry, to the construction industry, driving dump trucks and end dumps. Reggie has driven in and out of U.S. ports, hauling containers, and has been driving the Exient fuel cell truck since August of 2023. Welcome, Reggie. We're sure glad you could be here today. So we want to give you an idea of, we're talking about hydrogen in West Oakland, but the key thing here is the NorCal Zero project, which has brought hydrogen in the form of heavy-duty trucks to West Oakland. So we're going to start off with a little briefing on what is NorCal Zero, so that you won't be wondering the whole time why we're talking about it. So let me hand that back to the team here.
Okay, Brian, I can start out by giving some background to as to what NorCal Zero is. We initiated this, as Brian said, over 5 years ago, and it involves 16 different partners working together. We raised $20 million from the California Air Resources Board and from the California Energy Commission. And then there were $7 million of contributions from the Bay Area Air District and from the Alameda County Transportation Commission. And so today we have one of the largest hydrogen refueling stations supporting both trucks and light duty vehicles on East Bay Mud property adjacent to the Port of Oakland. And we have 30 Hyundai Class 8 fuel cell trucks that are operating to and from the Port of Oakland, moving containers into various locations in the region, as far south in the Bay Area to Fremont, but over into the Central Valley to Stockton, Lathrop, those destinations, and up to Sacramento. The trucks have been operating exceedingly well. We've been collecting data on their operations. But what I think is most important, Brian, for the West Oakland community is the fact that we can eliminate criteria emissions. There are no emissions out of the tailpipes of these trucks. They're very quiet and the like. But this is a demonstration of 30 trucks. Our goal, ultimately the goal, not just NorCal Zero, but the state of California, is to convert the 5,000 trucks that are operating in and out of the Port of Oakland to zero emission, a combination of battery and fuel cell. This project is demonstrating the capabilities of fuel cell. So that kind of, in a summary fashion, identifies what NorCal Zero is all about.
Thanks, Jamie. And of course, you can put questions, clarifications, comments in the chat. One thing I would ask is if you want to start a conversation with someone in chat. Do it. Don't do it in everybody, right? Well, the team here will be trying to sort your questions from whatever else is in the chat. And so if there's a whole lot of conversation, sometimes we get a whole different meeting going on in the chat. And if that's going on, it'll be hard to find your real questions. So if you want to have, comment back and forth with someone, please do it in the private part of the chat. Julia here is going to be trying to capture your questions, and I will then rely on her to read back an assortment of them when the time comes. The other thing that's going to happen here with the construction of this is I'm going to ask all the panelists for, so hydrogen, we all agree, is a two-sided coin. It's got upsides, it's got downsides, pros and cons right now, as it exists today. So I'm going to go through first and ask each of the panelists, what's the upside for you? Not globally, but from your perspective, representing what you represent on this panel, what's the upside right so far? And then we'll allow a few questions from the audience. We'll read a few. If you have questions about the upside, we don't just want to talk at you for the next hour. Then we'll look at a couple of questions for the panel. Try to keep those on the upside. We're going to have plenty of time for what people might think is the downsides. So, and then I'll go back through the panel and ask, well, what's yet to be done? What are some of the problems, the things we need to be working on? So let's start. And since I started with Jamie last time, I'm going to start with the guy who has to sit in the rig every day and ask Reggie, how's this working for you as a driver, Reggie? What's the upside for you? What's the experience like?
I believe
Reggie?
Reggie's still having some technical difficulties joining.
Oh, okay. I thought he was, oh, sorry. I thought he was already here. All right. We'll come back to Reggie then. Bill, how about you? What's working?
So for me, I have zero emission tractors in the yard, so electric tractors. So that's the comparison that I could relate to. Hydrogen is really an electric truck with hydrogen as the power source. So for us, what we've experienced, of course, the emissions are non-existent. That's a big plus. Maintenance wise for us, doing the oil change, doing the filter cleaning like we would do on a diesel truck, all of those are eliminated. They just don't exist. On electric, because of the vocation that we do, we don't have to chase fuel. We just plug it in and then it's ready when we need to use it. So that's been the upside for us.
Thanks, Bill. And we realize you don't have a hydrogen truck yet, but
Yeah, it went away with Nikola.
Okay. All right. That's an important statement. It is a dynamic marketplace right now, isn't it?
Yes.
For all zero emission.
Brian,
Yeah.
Reggie's the best one to answer that first question.
Yes.
But I will, while we're waiting for Reggie, hopefully he can get reconnected. I have a Class B license, so I've driven the battery electric trucks, I've driven the fuel cell trucks, and I've actually on a test track operated the trucks, both battery and fuel cell, with a heavy load, with a trailer, not on public highways, but on test tracks. And a couple of things I could at least share, and Bill, I think, has a same experience with any zero emission vehicle. They are quiet. That's number one. I think for truck operators, drivers who are used to a cab over design instead of the engine out front, but sitting on top of the engine, that was not the most desirable experience historically, right? A hot diesel engine rumbling away. And so there was, I think, for many drivers in the initial stages thinking, oh, this is the same that the bad experience we had in the earlier days, when in fact drivers like how quiet they are. The suspension system is excellent. They operate very smoothly. And they've told us as well that the line of sight that they have from this cab over design has been very helpful to them in maneuvering the vehicles. So we hear a lot of good responses in our surveys of the drivers that
Mhm.
like these trucks.
Yep. And I have gone for a ride around, and the drivers are always very happy with the vehicles, and they are quiet, they are smooth, they have nice air conditioners. Uh, there was a thing back in the day, some of the drivers were driving around with the window open because it was hot, and they would lose the hearing in their left ear because it was just so noisy driving around the ports and the trucks themselves. So that part we'll ask when our friend gets back. Austin Blake, from a standpoint of maintenance and taking care of these vehicles, what's working these days? What's good about it?
It's it's definitely much different from diesel engine maintenance. I mean, the chassis is fairly similar. We follow Hyundai's recommendations, obviously, with maintenance, but as far as the fuel cell stacks and the hydrogen fuel systems, there's not a whole lot of extra maintenance required. So, like Bill was saying, we've removed some of the emissions after treatment systems that we use now. That's complicated, difficult to maintain, takes a lot of maintenance, and replace them with obviously the fuel cell stack and EV batteries. So it's similar in some ways, and then cleaner in others.
How tough is it, or do you think it is? I don't know. Did you start as a diesel mechanic?
Yeah, yeah. That's where I began. Down the pit changing oil. Yeah.
Was it a fairly, I don't say easy, but a smooth transition to go from working on diesels to working on these trucks?
Yeah. If so, from a tech that just works on diesel engines, it could be complicated because the system, going from an electric propulsion system, and previously working on the diesel engine, it's the high voltage systems are much different. So what we did as Pat Bay is we chose technicians that had already gone through the EV training with our Kenworth product and selected those techs to then go through the hydrogen training. So ultimately, they already had a solid foundation in EV, which helped the transition to hydrogen. So really, it really wasn't that difficult to pick out, technicians that knew what they were looking at, as far as the EV side of it. Now the hydrogen side, that's a whole nother, whole nother monster there. You
Yeah.
almost have to be a chemist in some
Uh,
aspects to really troubleshoot and figure out what's going on with these things. But um, as far as reliability, Jamie was touching on it. They've done fairly well. We haven't had a ton of major issues with these units, so we've been knock on wood so far, fairly lucky.
Good. So it does sound though like um, training for existing mechanics or people who want to get into the industry is going to be a really important aspect, which is jobs is something communities think about when new
Yes,
technologies are popping up, right? So
Hey, Brian.
safety.
Brian, slightly off subject, but to your point that you just made, AC Transit has a pretty extensive fuel cell program, and I think they have 180 technicians, and they have a entire training program, and I think they're interacting with community colleges. So for those local residents who have interest in advanced technologies, whether it's fuel cell or battery electric, I think there are opportunities, not only with them, but also Pape, who's local, who's in San Leandro, for jobs.
great. And for those who don't know what we're saying when we say Pape, since we didn't mention them in the introductions. That is the maintenance partner, is that right? That's working on
Pape
Raquel's Zero.
Kenworth, we support the 30 hydrogen trucks, running around now. We have our location, San Leandro is our main location, supporting these trucks. We also have trained technicians in French Camp and Sacramento if needed. So far, they we haven't had to utilize those locations, but they're there if we need them.
Great. And coming over here, Sam Wilson. When you look at I mean, you have a broad spectrum from the scientific and policy side. When you look at NorCal Zero as an example, what's working in this nascent industry?
Yeah, thanks, Brian, and thanks for having me today, everybody. I think I certainly bring a different perspective than some of the other folks here on the panel today. I'm looking much more at like what are the life cycle emission impacts of hydrogen, and moving away from a fossil fueled freight system, and also kind of comparing it to what do the academics say that or comparing hydrogen to say like a battery electric truck. So that just to frame where I'm coming from here. I think immediately it is apparent that it's good to see deployments of zero emission trucks, especially in communities like West Oakland that have a much higher pollution burden than many of their neighboring communities. That is good to see. Hydrogen, today's hydrogen has about a 10% reduction in life cycle greenhouse gas emissions compared to diesel and biofuel blends. That is nice. I think we can do much better with green hydrogen and through electrolysis in the long run. But just at the highest level, I think that projects like this are showing fleets that longer runs on zero emission using zero emission technologies it's achievable in the short term. I think Brian, you and I were in a meeting a few weeks ago with a trucker. I don't know if he's involved in this project, but he's doing runs from Port of Oakland to the Port of Long Beach, using a fuel cell electric truck. In the long run, I think we will see battery electric technologies filling that space. But as a proof of concept and to get folks interested in moving away from diesel, away from natural gas trucks, it's an exciting thing to see. It's a good starting place to improve from here, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation about improvements and right sizing hydrogen and freight.
Quick clarification. So you said there's, I guess, over the whole life cycle, which means the entire fuel process and everything, we get a 10% improvement over petroleum right now.
Yeah,
The truck is zero, but upstream of that, we still have emissions and they offset the zero. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and I'm citing research from the International Council on Clean Transportation, and just talking about climate emissions, not about air quality, which is the most immediate impact to freight adjacent communities. But yeah, I mean, we see a little over 800 grams of carbon dioxide equivalent per kilometer for hydrogen fuel cell vehicles on using today's mix of hydrogen, which is it's a little over 95% of hydrogen is produced from fossil fuel feedstocks today. That can be improved, but certainly, I do think that, we see significant reductions in life cycle impacts from hydrogen trucks that are running on hydrogen fuel produced from electrolysis. There's still some questions around energy efficiency there and highest use case, but we can get into that in a little bit. But I think that answers your question. And yes, it's great to see zero emission tailpipe vehicles operating in communities that are impacted. But the pollution is shifted somewhere else, and that is a place that we are lacking in research. So this academics that are on the call today, I'm looking at y'all for partnerships and ideas on more life cycle assessments for air quality and hydrogen and freight. So thanks,
Thanks,
Brian.
Sam. Thank you. To the degree that I was able to understand your question, I think I do, or your answer. So, and I think that's really an important piece of this whole discussion is how much can communities that are affected or nearby or somehow involved, right? How much can we, how do we tell this story in a way we can all understand it? Since we don't have, I don't think we have Reggie back, do we?
Apparently not.
Okay.
I
So
don't.
we'll move along here. I want to, as I said, everybody said a little something about how it works. What's some of the upside? Let's ask our audience. Julia, do we have any questions relative to what folks just heard?
Yeah, we've had a couple questions in the chat. So, relative to what we just heard, one of the questions was, how and where the hydrogen used in Oakland for the New York Cause Zero program is currently produced and transported.
So I can address that first. It is being derived from production in Las Vegas. It's being transported from Las Vegas to the station. I think to Sam's point, it is not 100% renewable at this point in time, to be sure. The carbon intensity of that fuel is a zero carbon intensity. That's a requirement under the project standards. And it is using combination of different renewable sources of hydrogen or of methane with regular methane to reach that 0% and a renewable content of about 52%. It is not where we want to be, but the trucks do operate with some significant advantages in their operational efficiencies and capabilities. And the fuel cells are agnostic to where the hydrogen comes from. So, as we'll get into this maybe in more detail later on in the webinar, how we regulate and control how hydrogen is produced. But at the end of the day, we will need hydrogen along with battery electric technologies to meet our climate change goals. That is an absolute, and it will evolve to the point where we achieve the targets that the state of California has established.
Mhm. Thank you, Jamie. Julia, was there another question?
Yeah, there's a question that kind of follows up on the first one. Was when do we expect green hydrogen to make it to West Oakland?
Good question. Anybody have thoughts on the projection for, I think Sam touched on some of this, what the future of improving the fuel supply looks like. Anybody have a projection? Are we a year out, a decade out from, maybe the first thing is, what are the ways we make green hydrogen? And then how far are we from achieving that manufacturing goal?
I think we should look at when someone uses the color code for different colors of hydrogen, that can be very confusing. But at the end of the day, what we ultimately want to reach is a carbon intensity of 0, where we're not adding more CO2 or methane to the atmosphere that creates problems with climate, greenhouse gas emission or warming, planet warming. But the desired goal is at 100% renewable feedstock. So that would be solar, that would be wind. Included within that mix are renewable biomass sources from agriculture, from forestry, from any number of food waste products and the like. When we will get to that timing as to how soon, a lot will depend on how successful California is with its hydrogen hub program and the Arches program, which is California's hub, hydrogen hub, uh, promoting and orchestrating renewable sources. This is a goal that has been established by the state of California, their resources board, the California Energy Commission, and the governor's office as well. So I would like to think within the next 5 years, we will see much greener, meaning closer to CI of zero. In this case, these 30 trucks are based on a CI of zero, which is good, but to get to 100% renewable, a lot of that depends on the cost and bringing that cost down by driving volume up.
So maybe 5 years. And how much of this is dependent on the marketplace itself? We know the state is making a big commitment. Can the state can't really do it alone just because the state says we want to do it, right? The market has to pick up hydrogen as something they want to use. Is that right?
It's absolutely true, and it's one of the challenges of how do you make it affordable? Where it's not a level playing field. Conventional fuels, you and I don't pay, in our audience, we do not pay the true cost of the petroleum fuels that we buy when we go to the gas station. Those externalities are not internalized in those costs. So it's where California plays a significant role in leveling that playing field. And they do it in two ways. They do it through incentivizing through grants, through the low carbon fuel standard credits, through various mechanisms to help promote the more expensive solutions, which are the advanced technology that are directed at cleaner solutions, both in terms of criteria emissions and climate change. But the other aspect of that, beyond incentive funding, is regulation. And that's where California has been a leader in regulation. We're facing some headwinds now at the federal level. I'm sure many are aware that there's a proposal in Congress to strip California of its right to its waivers in order to establish higher emission requirements than the federal government does. But regulation and incentive funding are both critical to achieve our ultimate goals.
Great, thank you for that. We're gonna flip the coin here, but we finally have Reggie on. I don't think that's Reggie's name, but we have Reggie on here now.
Yeah, this
Great
is
to see
Reggie.
you.
Hi guys, how you doing?
Good.
Sorry if
Great
I'm a
to see
little
you.
late.
That's quite all right. We're glad to have your voice in this conversation.
Okay.
We finished up the first round of questions, which were on the plus side. What is this hydrogen truck? What's it like for you as a driver? What's the upside?
The upside for me is I really like the comfort of it, I guess, to start with. The maneuverability, mobility of it's really good. I understand from the environmental side, just drips of water. It's no smoke. But I would say for most of our guys, the maneuverability of it, we can turn really on a sharp turn, and the softness of the ride is really good. So
Great
that
suspension.
would be my answer. Yeah.
And in the cab, the driver experience is comfortable. It's good.
Very comfortable. Yeah.
Yeah.
very comfortable.
How's it compare to those construction tractors you used to drive?
Oh yeah, like I said, a lot softer. Yeah, the only thing I would say it's a flat face, what we
Mhm.
used to call when I started cab overs, but oh yeah, it's just a softer ride.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. You go home at night feeling
Cleaner, much cleaner.
cleaner? Yeah.
Yes.
You go home at night feeling a little less weary?
Oh yeah. I'm not tired at all. And compared to most of you guys, I'm almost a 60-year-old guy and I'm not even tired when I get home. So and the construction trucking, it was a lot of bumps and you know, just the hard, I don't want to say it wasn't hard labor because I was just driving, but the ride was a lot rougher. So
Yeah.
that's what I keep coming back to. So yeah, so I enjoy it. I think most of the guys I work with does as well.
You can hear the radio. It's quiet.
Oh yeah, you can definitely hear the radio. It's quiet. And matter of fact, I work, obviously, I think you know, I work at the port. It's
Hmm.
port operation, and even the staff workers or the port workers will say, "Hey, don't move because we can't hear you." And so that's a lot of the questions we get. It's just uh, we're visible, but they can't hear us. So if they
Oh,
walk in
oh,
between the containers, then we have to hold still.
they have to
Who wants to move because they can't
you
hear
have
us.
to build in some sound to go on this thing, right? So
Yeah,
you hear.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's a great
thank you for that.
experience.
Oh, great. Very good. We'll come back to you later for maybe some of the downside if there is any. Um,
Might be a couple. Okay.
Julia, any other questions before I flip the coin here?
Yeah, I think there's one more that kind of piggybacks off the conversations we've been having. Um, this is from Clara. Can you speak to the future of hydrogen under Trump? How is the regulatory landscape changing, and what's the best way to promote zero emission options now that there's no mandate to get rid of diesel?
Anybody want to grab it first? Maybe there might be a couple of you with a perspective on this one.
I definitely have one, but maybe Sam wants to weigh in at all since he's also dealing on a federal level.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I can say that, last week was we received some pretty tough uh, 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 news pieces, or I don't know what to call it at this point, but Congress voted essentially to overturn several key waivers that the Environmental Protection Agency issued that allowed California to implement and enforce several key truck electrification, zero emission, and lower emission truck and car passenger car policies also. California has vowed to take whomever to court. I'm not an attorney, so I can't really speak to how that works. I do think it will be interesting to see how it works, regardless. We haven't had a lot of good news for the past several months on the federal front, to say the least. And the congressional Republicans are also working to undo several key tax credits that were included in the Inflation Reduction Act that significantly lowered the cost of zero emission trucks. The 45W credit provided up to $40,000 in a purchase rebate for commercial vehicles. And it looks as though they're also working to undo the clean hydrogen incentives as well. So um, it's not looking great. I
Yeah.
could try to go into more specifics, but for the sake of time, I could maybe just leave it there.
Uh,
I think it gives us
Sam,
a sense. Let me put a little spin on it before you speak, Jamie. California is a big state, a big economy. And the manufacturing world, the trucking world has already got a few years of commitment into manufacturing zero emission vehicles. Um, can California expect that manufacturers will continue to support this work and deliver the trucks? And can California go it alone for a few years?
I think California intends to go it alone if they have to.
Uh-huh.
That all gets very uncertain in the total budget picture with California. I
Mhm.
think we're all aware that the administration wants to basically eliminate Medicaid. Medi-Cal is a big program in California. Our obligation to
Mm.
people's health insurance is critical. So if you had to weigh a dollar going to people's health insurance to survive, literally, compared to the longer term goals of cleaning up our emissions, which also affect our health, the first priority would be for Medi-Cal. So I think the state's trying to deal with all of these changes. What I would say is this. First of all, the House has acted as Sam referenced, but the Senate still has to act. So it's not a done deal through the legislature. Secondly, with respect to California's emission requirements, which exceed the federal requirements, those are administratively allowed. And it requires a public hearing process that can take as much as a year to change the rules that EPA granted under the legislation for EPA. So for the Congress to say they're going to take away our rights to establish emission requirements, that's not legally doable. Of course, there are many aspects of this that are legally in our favor that are being challenged in the courts, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah. And just for clarity for anyone on online who may not may not follow all these things, these waivers, California passes regulations that are more strict than the federal air quality regulations, and then the state has to ask the federal government for a waiver of the Clean Air Act rules, waiving them to a higher standard. It's not waiving them to a lower standard. So, and there's a fight now over whether this administration will support those increased standards or not. So gets
and
kind of confusing in my mind sometimes when we talk about waivers of the Clean Air Act, right? So
hey,
let's look.
Brian, just
Yeah.
one note to Sam's comment. He was referring to 45V, that the House has passed rescission of that amendment, or not amendment, but tax credit that came out of the Biden administration. That is really critical to achieve the green hydrogen goals. It provides a tax credit for very low carbon intensity.
Mm,
So hopefully that will stay intact, but that works against California's goal to achieve the kind of green hydrogen that we all want to see.
yeah.
And
Very
if I could
exciting to change the world.
just if I could just add just a couple more points. I mean, uh, yeah, the actions that we're seeing at the federal level are, that if the revocation of the waivers indeed stand through the lawsuits, what's happening is that the federal government is taking away California's most cost-effective method of meeting the standards that Congress sets for California and other states. So it's a bit of an odd kind of Congress shooting California in the foot in some way. My analogy is not working very well, but it's
Mhm.
at the highest level, it's taking away our most cost-effective method of reducing pollution in the state. Transportation is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions nationwide, throughout most of the states, and certainly for California. Medium and heavy duty trucks are the largest source of nitrogen oxides, which go on to produce ground level ozone. And I believe well over 90% of Californians live in areas that are not meeting the national standards for healthy air, the national ambient air quality standards. So it takes away our most cost-effective way of reducing pollution, and we're going to have to meet those standards regardless. So we have to find another way to do it. Now, there are other tools that California can use. The legislature is considering statewide indirect source rules right now, for example. We're following that very closely. There are other methods to accelerate zero emission truck adoption, whether it's, potentially fees for combustion trucks that fund incentives for zero emission trucks, or maybe retooling of the way that the low carbon fuel standard works to focus more on truck electrification. So California still has a lot of tools, and we're certainly hearing a fighting spirit from our leaders in Sacramento. That's nice to hear. But like I said, not a lot of good news from Washington, D.C. over the past few months.
Well, this goes without saying. Thanks, Sam, and Jamie. So I'm going to flip the script here a little. Look at the other side of the coin. We've heard about emissions reduction. We've heard about job creation. We've heard about the comfort and the health of the drivers. What's the other side of the coin, right? What are some of the holes, some of the fixes we need, some of the problems that exist? And we've heard some high level stuff here. Let me go back to the ground level and ask Reggie. It's a great thing to drive. What's some of the downside?
Compared to the combustible diesel trucks would be the power. So fortunately, our operation, what we do now is pretty much port to port. So 80% of what we do is port to the rail. But when from where we live here in the Bay, if we go out to Stockton and you got to go across to Altamont, it's low on power. So me and Jamie had spoke about that, some of the things they're going to do with the newer trucks coming out and trying to increase the power, reduce the weight. So that would be my negative, I guess, about what this truck can't do compared to the combustible engine. How do you get more power to it?
Right.
If we were going to make it longer distances, but like I said, fortunately for what we do right now, we're never really going any more than Sacramento, and it does well for that.
Yeah, okay.
It wouldn't do a Los Angeles with a load, through the grapevine.
So, I mean, with the Bill, you have a small fleet and you run a physical operation servicing trucks. What needs to get better?
So the discussion about what kind of fueling we need, what color, it doesn't really relate to us if we can't fuel the truck. So let's start on the basics. We need to build infrastructure that powers that truck that you buy. And you have to think of it as it's the first version of the iPhone, and it's not working yet, but it's going to work. It's just a matter of time. And so we appreciate the scientists and everybody else, CARB, and everybody else talking about the carbon emissions. But when it comes down to me dispatching Reggie, I just need the load to be delivered because that's how we earn our money. And so we seem to have a focus on, are we going to get green hydrogen before, we get, do we have fuel to fuel these trucks and get more trucks out there so we can build the infrastructure for green hydrogen? I think there's 7 or 8 colors in the hydrogen, and everybody fights over everything. And to us, it doesn't matter. We just need to get something that we can deliver our loads with, and the cost needs to come down dramatically for us to conduct business. So you can fight as much as you want about the colors. It doesn't relate to us on the street, and we're just dropping it down to street level. Not that we don't understand what that green hydrogen is, but I think we're putting the cart before the horse is how it comes to us. So definitely Reggie touched on some of the issues, and I think the power issue will get resolved. Technology with every iPhone, we got better and better and better. The weight issue, it's still heavy. That's a combination of better technology, refining that technology. I know the person that parks in my yard that has the Nikola truck. He was pushing the envelope. He was going down to LA, Long Beach, and back. And definitely what he was relying on is those stations to fuel him up to make it back up here. There's no in between. Also, the cost of these trucks is still very expensive. It's like a prototype. So the only way we're going to get that price reduced is to flood the market, get these companies to be able to turn a profit by mass producing these things. And we can tell what happened with Nikola. They couldn't get enough trucks out there, and they're gone. And so now we have less options. I had 2 HVIP vouchers for the hydrogen trucks, CARB, HVIP program, and also VW mitigation, which is both funds. They limited the amount of funds that would go out there. And so they were making it expensive for us to make a decision to get a truck. If you're going to give a grant, the grant is supposed to promote new technology. We're taking a lot of chances. The people that bought those Nikola trucks, they're dead weight right now. They can't afford to fuel them. The fuel is 7 times the price of diesel. Can't run a business on that. There's no support for them right now. And so we push the envelope too far, I think. We're more radical here in California, but you got to go back to basics. We're a business. I've got to be able to run my business. I've got to be able to hire drivers to drive those trucks and make a little profit. And what's happening here and what's been happening over the years, I mean, we can start with the Carl Moyer program with the filter installation, to upgrading the trucks to 2007 standard, to upgrading to 2010 standard. And then we have now the zero emission that got taken away, but it's an extreme. We're moving way too fast for technology to catch up with us. And that's where we got to get a reality check. So now, after saying all of that, do I support zero emission trucks? Yes, I want to see them working. My guys love them. The quietness, the no emission, even now they can answer their radios, two-way radios, their phone inside the truck, inside the cab of this, because we don't have that engine running. So that's what I would say we need to focus in on and make it work for all of us, because what we learned from West Oakland EIP is how much harm the diesel is doing to us as human beings. And we appreciate that. We support that effort. And it's more of an educational, is how West Oakland EIP didn't come out and beat us upside the head with it. They gave us the information that we made our own decisions. We saw the light. And that's how we have to do this. We have to let people see the light. Because as soon as you shove it down somebody's throat, they're going to resist, no matter how good it is. Try feeding a kid something that's good. They're going to reject it just because you're trying to feed them. It's good for you. So
thanks for the plug, Bill. I appreciate that. And I think, I haven't really seen any data recently, but years ago there was good data on health data on truckers' health, especially respiratory illness, that was directly related to their constant daily exposure to diesel emissions, especially I think the drayage truckers who sit in ports all day. So there's these benefits all around. Let me go to Austin. This is A. I'm sorry. I can call you Alan or Albert.
Blake's fine. 2 first names.
Blake, what from the standpoint of maintenance, we heard a little about what's working, you know, it's easier in some ways. What do you see either now or on the horizon that's probably going to need some additional work?
Well, with these trucks, there is less maintenance than diesel engine. It's just the cost, I think, right now. It's like what Bill is saying. It's extremely expensive. Um, even the parts are expensive right now. So I could see that's really a major downfall, right? Is otherwise serviceability, it's fairly simple. You know, everything's easy to get to. And relatively speaking, it's very similar to working on a conventional tractor anyway. So it's just cost is a huge factor in that.
Mm-hmm. Jamie,
Well,
besides 9 colors of diesel and in the federal government, what's right now? What's not working? What do we need to be doing?
well, first of all, I think Bill gave a marvelous answer to the most of what your question is,
Mhm.
the challenges. It comes down, what Bill was talking about is total cost of ownership. If Bill, as a fleet operator, cannot uh, rationalize, show parity with his competitors, he's not going to be able to take on whether it's fuel cell or battery electric. He has to be able to show a TCO that allows him to compete because the government cannot continue uh, building this out. The government can provide regulation. It can provide gap funding for incentivizing advanced technologies to help people like Bill and his fleets to afford this advanced technology, which has long-term benefits. I would add one other aspect of that. That's clearly the economic side. Uh, and maybe make a further point to that, hydrogen is too darn expensive. So we've talked about the greening of it and how important that ultimately is, but it's just too darn expensive. If I gave Bill and Reggie a free truck, they would say, well, I want to know what am I going to have to pay for the fuel? Because a free truck isn't going to help me when I have to spend 2, 3 times or more for the cost of that fuel. So that's critical. But the other thing I wanted to touch on, and Bill sort of also touched on this, is the technology readiness. So, and Reggie also spoke of this with respect to the power and the light. What are the 4 key advantages to fuel cell technology as an electric drive mode? This does not make them exclusive. We need both battery and fuel cell. They have different applications, but the 4 key advantages are range, so that the truck operator can do those longer trips, not just short haul drayage, but regional haul. Payload, Reggie and Bill talked about this, being able to carry similar loads out of the ports. So the fuel cell trucks are still too heavy. They need to be lighter. They are moving. One of the reasons the Nikola truck made it all the way to Long Beach is he's about that particular truck is 2,000 pounds lighter, let's say, than our truck and the NorCal truck, the Hyundai truck. The Kenworth fuel cell truck is around 22,000 pounds. So we're seeing continual improvements in the technology to reduce the weight so they can carry more payload. The third is the quick refueling of the vehicles so that they're not waiting around long periods of time to get back on the road to move goods. And the last critical factor is resiliency. What happens when the grid goes out and I need to move goods out of the ports because there's been an earthquake, we need to move goods, or there's a wildfire that interrupts the movement of those goods? That's a critical factor. Those are all valued assets on the hydrogen side, but you still have to meet what Bill and Reggie require operationally. We call it operational efficiency. So it's TCO and it's technology readiness to meet their operational logistics efficiently.
Oh, great. I was going to ask why hydrogen in trucks, but I think you just covered it. What's the benefit, right? So I think particularly, I've always thought that the fueling experience, and Reggie can correct me if I'm wrong, but the fueling experience is more like diesel. You roll in, you stick a thing in the side, and 5 minutes later you're leaving, and as opposed to parking and waiting for something to charge up. But so there's an experience, I think, that a psychological experience component of it that's very important too. So a few more. Let's get to some more sort of specific. Let's talk a little about safety. So if I looked, so there's a hydrogen fuel facility here near my house. It's on the other side of the freeway by the Port of Oakland. And it goes with the NorCal Zero project. So I've been there, I've toured it. Looks a lot, on one side, it looks a lot like a gas station. It has sort of pump looking things. You drive up and you fill up. On the backside behind the fence, there's these big tanks and all kinds of equipment. And I'm told that's to keep it liquefied. So this issue of the fuel process is not just making the stuff, it's actually how you have to maintain it. So if I looked at how that fuel station was built, whatever's underground, whatever's above ground, all that, how different would that look from a modern gas station that I go to every day? I know it has underground tanks, and there's nobody at my local gas station that looks like they know anything about fuel. There's a guy in a kiosk who sells me a candy bar, and there's a guy who shows up once a month and puts stuff in the ground somewhere. There's safety equipment there, but I don't see it. Can anybody talk a little about the physical infrastructure of these distribution points and whether it's something that our community should be concerned about?
It's an excellent question. I have some responses I'd like to give, but Tim Lippman from UC Berkeley, who's done a considerable amount of research, he's owned a fuel cell car, he owns a battery electric car, he built the station himself. I think it would be useful if Tim is able to, before I talk, I don't want to dominate this. I have a lot of information.
Let me jump in, Jimmy. Thanks. Hey, everyone. So I've been kind of on the on deck circle here to answer questions like this about safety, and then I do have thoughts about green hydrogen supply coming on. There are some cool technologies. I've been doing this for like 25 years, and so we've knocked down a lot of the barriers that initially exist. Like, would fuel cells work at all? They were too bulky. The power density wasn't there. I mean, I was messing around with fuel cells in the lab in the mid 90s, and you couldn't fit them into a car, let alone a truck. So we've solved a lot of problems, and I think it's important to point that out. But the economic challenges remain, specifically, but we're kind of getting down to the economics. So that's a good thing. That's kind of the last thing. If you don't have the technical feasibility, the economics don't really matter, right? But then the safety question is a really important one. So I did operate, a small hydrogen station up in Richmond to test prototype fuel cell vehicles about 15 years ago when the industry wanted to move to the higher pressure. Okay, and it's 700 bar, or if people like PSI, it's 10,000 PSI, right? So the standard was 5,000 PSI, which the buses are still using, but the trucks for longer range and the vehicles have gone to this 10,000 PSI. So that's high pressure. So that involves high pressure storage. Those who've worked around hydrogen know it's a very small molecule, so it likes to leak and it is very flammable, but it is also very light, so it dissipates very quickly. If it leaks, it goes up at 40 miles an hour. It's kind of gone compared to a liquid fuel that would form a pool or LPG, these sort of heavier fuels. Hydrogen's light, so it has advantages from a safety perspective, but it is very flammable. So the modern stations have a whole suite of safety systems that will detect leaks. There are, leak detectors that can sense small percentages of hydrogen in air. well below the percentage you would need to ignite. So you can detect small problems before they could even become a safety hazard with these leak detectors. And then there's cameras that should you have a fire, that is one thing with hydrogen, it forms a very hard to see flame, but there's cameras that can detect any kind of small flame that might occur. So these modern stations have a tremendous amount of safety systems. That to me, I think the current view of the industry is that the dangers of hydrogen are different than liquid fuels like gasoline and diesel, but they're not worse. It's just something, we kind of take gasoline for granted, right? Like, oh yeah, it's a safe fuel, but it's got its dangers. And I've got some funny, historical stuff on that, but probably don't have time for that today. But kind of a quick take. There's a lot of safety systems. There's a whole, hydrogen safety set of it's called H2 tools with lots of resources for first responders, fire departments. But, back to the kind of hydrogen station permitting thing, I would say the first thing to do if you want to build a hydrogen station is talk to the local fire officials, get in early, make sure there's no kind of showstoppers with permitting or, things like overhead power lines could be a concern or, make sure you have a clear path before you order those hydrogen trucks or buses to kind of get the station, because the lead time for trucks and bus orders is a couple years and it takes a couple years to build a station. Now, hopefully for the trucks, you're not building a station, you're taking advantage of someone else's station. But for NorCal Zero, Jamie's project, he built a station and it took what, a year longer than expected, but it's there, it's operating. So maybe 3 years to build a station, going through all those safety protocols. But safety, I will just say this, safety is extremely important. No one should be, taking any shortcuts on safety. Community safety, dealing with this leakage problem, we can talk a little bit more about. There's a lot of efforts to reduce, leakage to the system. That's safety, that's economics. I'll leave it there.
Yeah, and I would
So
to
none
that.
of you would, I mean, let's say that there was I don't know how far from your house the local gas station is. The one for me is about 2.5 blocks. If you're in that situation, would you mind having a hydrogen station at that position, that place? Would it bother you to know it was over there? Any of you?
Yeah, I don't think so. To be sure, and I speak on the basis of experience, as was emphasized by Tim. It's an explosive fuel, but it's a very small molecule, and if it's designed, these stations that are being designed is to really handle emergencies or incidents in a very safe manner. When I was at AC Transit, which is almost over 12 years ago, there was a fire at the station in Emeryville, right across the street from Pixar, where a valve failed, pressure relief valve. It let hydrogen up through a vent stack, and in spite of that fire, virtually no damage was done. There was no threat to any of the employees or people in the local community. And the station, we did a thorough examination as to why that valve failed. But the bottom line is there was virtually no damage, and the station reopened pretty much as it was before. 3 months after that, the gas station you were not the specific one you referred to, but one in Martinez, had a driver drive over a gasoline pump, a dispenser, started a fire. The entire station was destroyed and all the cars. And one of the key reasons for that is there's no carbon in hydrogen. So there's no radiation of heat beyond the single flame. So as long as the station is designed and the buses or the trucks, the vehicles, you have actually a very safe design and reliable system. AC Transit has dispensed well over 1 million kilograms of fuel in the last 10 years or longer. And they've carried millions of passengers on their buses with virtually no incidents whatsoever. So it is an explosive fuel. It needs to be treated with respect, but it has a lot more, I would say, safe advantages over the devil that we know.
Thank you.
If I can jump in and ask a question, and you
Sure.
guys are talking about the design of the station as it pertains basically to leaks. But what about the tanks? Were they tested for a high impact for an accident? Um,
You talking
what's
about on the truck or in the station?
uh, and on the truck basically?
The
So
truck,
they
the
have these
truck
10
tanks
tanks.
are
Yeah.
are ballistic tested. Yes, they're tested for impacts, and they also have safety relief valve at the top for if there's a fire. If they overheat, they'll vent out the top of the at the top of the truck.
Yeah.
They're tested.
I was showed that line that, so I don't know what the degree of impact that all of it would just eject out the top of the truck. So
Yeah, it'll evacuate
yeah, that's one
out
of
the
the
top.
questions I get. How safe are they out on the road? You know, if you got an accident. So
Yeah, that truck even did a rollover, which we would not want to see, but those tanks are probably the most durable piece of equipment on that vehicle. And I'll give you an example. There was a fire of a fuel cell bus in Bakersfield 2 years ago. It's since been determined that that fire, the bus had just been refueled at the station. So the bus was, and this was late at night, the bus was right next to a 15,000 gallon, similar tank to what you see, Reggie, at the station in Oakland. After it was refilled, maybe 10 minutes later, a fire started. It had since been determined that the batteries led to that fire. But the entire bus burned down, completely destroyed. The tanks did not rupture. Ultimately, Austin was referring to, the safety valves released and let the gas flow up and out, up and above and away. But the hydrogen and the fuel cell were not the problems with that fire. Even in spite of that fire right next to the station was completely isolated. There was, except for damage done to the dispensers, the tank was isolated. There was no fire spread, no fire, flames were spread. Flames were spread to the station, but the station did not ignite. So it did exactly as it was designed to be safe under those worst case situations.
it's good to know.
Thank you.
Thanks. Mhm.
Thank you.
If I could just jump in real quick and add.
Sure.
So,
When I get
you
to
know,
a couple last questions from the group, but go ahead.
yeah, thanks. So, while I may have some upstream concerns with hydrogen, I would concur with what folks are saying here. I think that like the immediate safety concerns are often overblown. And I live about 4 blocks away from a light duty station myself, but I do think that Tim's point about addressing leaking or leakage during hydrogen fueling is absolutely key. I mean, the whole reason why we're doing this is to reduce pollution, right? And from a climate perspective, hydrogen gas has a global warming potential around 30 times that of carbon dioxide, and so addressing leakage is really key to ensuring that the technology is actually doing what it's supposed to do, or like why we're doing this in the first place. Yeah, so the latest study I've seen from I think it was in the Journal of Cleaner Production from about 5 years ago estimated that hydrogen leakage was about between 2 and 10% of what's out there. So maybe it's gotten better, but that is certainly something that we need to focus on.
Great. Something that I'd like to learn more about in the future is this whole notion of how hydrogen is a climate gas, and it seems like everything is 30 times worse than the thing below it. Like, petroleum's 30, I don't know, coal is 30 times worse than petroleum, everything. So it's hard for us amateurs to understand what all these things mean sometimes. So Julia, I want to see, we got only about 12 minutes left. We have any questions out there from our loyal audience?
Yeah, we have 5 questions out there. I doubt we'll get to all of them, but I'll start with the first one.
Let me say, let's make this a kind of a lightning round. Let's keep the answers quick, so we try to get through 5 questions, okay?
Perfect. Question number 1. Given historical impacts of industrial incidents on communities like Richmond, How will West Oakland residents be actively involved in the development and approval of emergency response plans for hydrogen facility rather than just being informed after decisions have been made?
I'll take a quick shot at that, and somebody else might have an answer based on this, how this project came together. We were asked by folks at the California Air Resources Board a few years ago. They said, well, the new fueling stations, hydrogen's going to be great and all that, zero emission trucks and everything. Where do you want the stations in your neighborhood? I said, nowhere. It's like, not because it's unsafe, but because you got a 70-foot vehicle, weighs 90,000 pounds. We don't need them driving around our communities, even if they're zero emission. So these are kind of parallel concepts that we don't, just because it's zero emission doesn't mean the infrastructure belongs in our communities. So I'll let someone else answer.
I was going to say the same. There's no reason for hydrogen stations to be in the community. Especially given the range capabilities and the like. We need a network of public stations that service far away from those communities. So it isn't required, to be sure.
It's one of the things also we've worked with the port on. They said, well, where should we put truck parking? And they went out and found a bunch of potential locations. And we were allowed to have some input on which ones we thought were the best locations of the 10 or 12 options. I would say this is the answer to that question. Communities need to be involved early on and ask and allowed to offer really basic answers, like, does it really even belong near us? And we want to see it. What makes the most sense logistically for the industry? Guys like Bill need to be in those conversations. Where do these things belong? Whether it's a safety question or just a quality of life question.
And in Bill's case, he has a proposal which I think is ideal. It's to really provide full service, not just fuel, but to provide other conveniences, store convenience. He can speak to that. But there's an example where an on-site station that provides full service to the truckers is an advantage, can be an advantage for the community.
Mm-hmm.
Long time in the working with the West Oakland community on being the magnet for trucks to pull them away from the community. But I think the question, the way I understood it, is more of a concern about building a plan to deal with the hydrogen. And I would say the hydrogen is the least of our issues, of polluting and being a cause of a pollution event. I would be more concerned about the batteries that are on that hydrogen truck and battery technology, because we have seen the runaway batteries, and that's a technology issue that has gotten better, but everybody is playing chemist in their lab, and they're trying to squeeze more power into those batteries, and we don't know. We're going to have some issues with them. And I have brought this up at the Coast Guard Area Maritime Security, because it's a security risk too, in terms of a battery. How can you, City of Oakland Fire Department, handle this? And when their response came back to, oh, we get some training from Tesla on cars, it's not the same as trucks. We're carrying a lot more packs of batteries, and that is a concern. And those fumes are going to be very dangerous chemicals that are going to be up in the air. And so new technology, we're going to feel it. I still remember my first iPhone, my first cell phone, was actually a suitcase. So that's kind of how I see the hydrogen trucks, right? And that was portable, and we were very excited that we can take it with us, right? After having it come out of the car. And now we don't, we look at our iPhones and they're tiny. We don't even know where the battery is. We don't see it. It's kind of an afterthought, and that's what I'm hoping the technology will get to, because me and Reggie don't really care how that truck is powered. Just get us from point A to point B. Let us do our job, and we'll leave it up to you guys. And all we can say is stop fighting about the green hydrogen and the brown hydrogen and the pink hydrogen. It doesn't matter if we don't have hydrogen trucks. Build the infrastructure, then come back and sweep through, and let's clean it up to green hydrogen. We all love that. We all love green.
Thanks, Bill. Let's see if we can get one more question in here, Julia.
Great. So I'm gonna go down to this one. So the Netherlands earlier this year found out that green hydrogen was going to be 3 times more expensive than predicted. Over a fifth of green hydrogen projects in Europe have either stalled or canceled. Similar issues are happening in Australia. Why should we invest in hydrogen technology, especially when it's more expensive than electrification renewables, and when it has this track record of being a risky investment in other places?
Sam, maybe that's a place for you to start. I don't know.
I would say
Maybe. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
so. I was actually just at an event at First Element where they were demonstrating a hydrogen generator. I was interested in it. It made no sense when I was trying to get some electric trucks and I was being offered a diesel generator to charge up the electric trucks. That made no sense. I thought this was an interesting concept. Went down there. We're looking at the generator. We're talking to the Korean techs that were near the generator. And we actually asked them, how much is hydrogen in Korea? And they said it's $8 a kilogram, which is a lot cheaper than 35. But they said the true cost is actually 16, which is still half the price of our hydrogen. The government subsidizes, but it's still getting out there. I think eventually we'll figure out a way. We've got the Tim Lippmans of the world and Sam and other people that will figure out a way to reduce that cost. I think part of it is, from what I understand, solar and electrical power is really good, but you can't store it properly. You have to have big batteries. You can't transport it. This is kind of like, it's got its purpose. I think we can overcome the weight issue and the early technology adoption if CARB would just release trucks, release that money that they've been sitting on into flooding the market at the port with trucks. So there's a lot of them that are running around. Demand will be up for hydrogen. Infrastructure starts to get built, and we can deal with them on a local level within the port area. Overweight containers need to be exempted so we can have more of these hydrogen trucks running back and forth until the technology gets better and better and better. So we have to do it in baby steps. We're not going to be able to climb a couple of steps at a time, one at a time.
Yeah, can I answer that?
I think we could do an entire webinar on Bill's comments, I think. So who's that speaking? Go ahead.
Just wanted a little bit of input there on the industry, I guess, and why hydrogen over EV, BEV. It seemed like that's kind of the question. That's what it was, trying to go after. But with earlier, Reggie was talking about construction vehicles, construction, working construction, and now in a line haul application, we're talking about comparing different industries, and the hydrogen trucks make sense over BEV because there's more range there, and each application has a reason why it fits in a certain application. So like BEV, may work locally, whereas hydrogen we get some more range out of it. We can line haul a lot longer, and then construction is very heavy PTO usage, a lot of sitting, a lot of idling, where EV may not make sense. So there's applications where this stuff fits, and I think it's really important to make sure that we understand that we're not just hydrogen may not work for every application, and BEV may not work for every application. So that's where the industry's at right now, and that's where a lot of the feedback I get from our customers is, that doesn't make sense for my application. So that's really where we got to focus too.
That's an excellent point, and I would just add that volume production and volume distribution will address the price. And to conclude that hydrogen is not going to be affordable when it's the volume of production is so limited right now is premature. We expect, and Arches and the state are pushing to increase that volume in order to drive price down.
Yeah, I would jump on that real quick and just say what we want is somewhat higher production volume, but fairly closely co-located to the point of end use because hydrogen's bulky, it's expensive to transport. So right now it's being trucked in from Las Vegas. That adds a lot of cost. So if we could get production in Central Valley, there's a project in Richmond to make hydrogen from bio waste. That would be green. And get it closer into the point of end use and at reasonable scale. There are pathways to, getting it very competitive with fossil fuels.
And ultimately to transport it with fuel cell trucks.
All right, I'm going to have to shut off all your microphones. We're about 3 minutes from the end, and we want to respect everybody all the listeners who participated. We will document your questions and do our best to answer them. I have about a dozen questions I didn't get to ask, but it's been a very, I think, informative 90 minutes. And I appreciate all of your time and everyone out there in webinar land who's been listening in and commenting and sending us your questions. Julia, any last words from you?
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you for joining this project this webinar spun out of the NorCal Zero program. And I saw one of the questions is what's next? It says on our website the project ends in spring 2025. And I can say that despite all the challenges, the trucks are going to continue to operate. Reggie's going to continue to drive them, and we'll keep doing our best to push the industry forward. So really thankful for everyone's time here today. And if you, I know we didn't get to everyone's questions. If you want to submit any questions, you can submit them to julia@cte.tv, or I believe it's bbeverage@wowip.org. And we can do our best to get you to the right person to answer them. So we want to make sure we can get you the education and knowledge that you need. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, everyone, and thank all of you on the panel. It's been a great afternoon, and I've appreciated being able to moderate this.